Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over the weekend said Washington will bolster its defenses overseas to counter rapidly developing threats by China, especially in its aggressive stance toward Taiwan. NTD's Dana Monahan has the takeaways from the Shangri-La Dialogue Global Security Conference in Singapore.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is increasing security in the Western Hemisphere, taking back the Panama Canal from what he described as the malign Chinese influence.
China did not build that canal. We did. And we will not allow China to weaponize it or control it.
Hegseth called China's behavior towards its neighbors in the world an urgent wake-up call.
President Trump has also said that Communist China will not invade Taiwan on his watch. So our goal is to prevent war, to make the cost too high, and peace the only option.
The defense secretary says the U.S. does not seek conflict with the communist nation.
But we will not be pushed out of this critical region. And we will not let our allies and partners be subordinated and intimidated through its massive military buildup and growing willingness to use military force to achieve its goals, including gray zone tactics and hybrid warfare. China has demonstrated that it wants to fundamentally alter the region's status quo.
China protested against Hegseth, calling it a threat. It accused him of ignoring the call for peace from regional countries and of advocating a Cold War mentality. Australia is also sounding the alarm on Communist China's actions.
What we have seen from China is the single biggest increase in military capability and build-up in conventional sense by any country since the end of the Second World War.
Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles says Australia wants to see strategic transparency and reassurance provided by China.
And an understanding of why it is needed to have such an extraordinary military build-up that China is engaging in.
Hey, how you doing? How are you?
Hegseth has urged Australia to substantially boost its defence spending to 3.5% of its GDP as soon as possible, saying the investment would help maintain peace through strength in the Indo-Pacific. The Philippines says you only need to look at how China treats their much smaller neighbors to envision a China-led international order.
What the Chinese government considers fair and just may stand in stark contrast to the norms and values accepted by the rest of the world.
Meanwhile, Lithuania says the United States' strategic focus on the Indo-Pacific is both justified and necessary, but not America's responsibility alone.
And the convergence of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea into an increasingly coordinated authoritarian axis, let's put it diplomatically, demands an equally unified response by us.
And the Dutch are warning that Chinese cyber espionage targeting the Netherlands is intensifying. The Dutch defense minister said Saturday that the Chinese Communist Party is especially focused on stealing advanced semiconductor technology. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A Trump-backed conservative wins Poland's presidential election, while South Korean voters are gearing up for their presidential election tomorrow. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Poland's new president, Karol Nawrocki, won nearly 51% of the vote, barely beating the more liberal candidate, the mayor of Warsaw, who received about 49% in the runoff election. Nawrocki is 42 years old, and he campaigned on a nationalist Poland First agenda. He's also endorsed by President Trump, meeting with him at the White House during his campaign. He supports giving military aid to Ukraine to help him fend off invasion. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky offering his congratulations.
My congratulations to the president, new president of Poland. And Poland is our big friend and strong neighbor.
The outcome of this election could create a conflict with the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who's more liberal. Nawrocki has the power to veto his legislation, and he's also been a staunch critic of the European Union. He's also said that he would oppose Ukraine's membership to NATO. Meanwhile, over in South Korea, voters are gearing up to elect a new president on Tuesday. The two candidates are Lee Jae-myung and Kim Moon-soo. Lee represents the Liberal Democratic Party and Kim from the Conservative People Power Party. The election was sparked by the removal of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, who imposed martial law for several hours last December. A poll published late last week by Real Meter puts Lee ahead with 49% and Kim with 37%. Many analysts are looking at this election as a turning point on whether the country will move closer to the U.S. or closer to North Korea, China, and Russia.
Now, South Korea has had leftist presidents before, but Yi is different because he is more determined, he's more ruthless, he's more pro-North Korea, he's more anti-U.S. than his predecessors.
He's another ally of Xi Jinping, we should point out.
And Kim Jong-un.
South Korea maintains one of the largest U.S. military bases, but certain aspects are widely considered under the influence of the Chinese Communist Party as well as North Korea. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
A Hong Kong man is fighting for his city's freedom while living in exile in Taiwan. Fu Tong and his wife were among the first demonstrators in Hong Kong charged with rioting in 2020 after pro-democracy protests started in 2019. Fu is now preparing to mark this year's anniversary of Beijing's June 4th massacre. Here's the story.
Fu Tong co-hosts a Hong Kong human rights exhibition in Taiwan's capital, Taipei. It showcases artwork and photos from the protest movement. He's now preparing to mark this year's anniversary of the violent response to protesters in and around Tiananmen Square in Beijing on June 4th, 1989. Before dawn, Chinese tanks entered Tiananmen Square. They crushed weeks of pro-democracy demonstrations by students and workers. Taiwan is the only part of the Chinese-speaking world where June 4th can be remembered openly.
When Hong Kong can no longer hold a June 4th vigil and can no longer even mention it, Taiwan's existence becomes very important. It's one of the very few places in Asia where people can openly commemorate the June 4th incident, discuss it, and even condemn the Chinese Communist Party. The existence of such a space is hugely significant.
A national security law imposed by the Chinese Communist Party has outlawed such events in Hong Kong.
We have witnessed how our relatively free city can be completely silenced in just 5 years. Saying something anti-China or expressing views the government doesn't like can get you arrested and detained, with no idea when your trial will happen or how long you might lose your freedom for.
Fu leads tours of the Hong Kong Human Rights Exhibition in Taipei while also sharing some of his experiences from the front lines of the protests. He nevertheless feels that the message he hopes to convey is difficult to reach those still living in Hong Kong. But Fu's story resonated with some Taiwanese visitors who fear the island may head down a similar path as cross-strait tensions continue to escalate.
Freedom and democracy do not come easily. While listening to the tour just now, the guide choked up several times. I just think it's incredibly suffocating to see a once free and democratic place turn into what it is now. I really hope this will never happen to Taiwan. We are well aware of what the Chinese Communist Party wants to do to us. Their methods may not be the same as what they did to Hong Kong. Instead, they might use cultural infiltration or gradually influence our daily lives.
Fu remains committed to advocating for Hong Kong issues and the values of freedom while living far away from home.
I really feel like I've been chosen to be in this era. If I don't step up to do things that seem foolish and unrewarding, then who will? As long as I can, I'm willing to keep going.
The Chinese Communist Party has never provided a full death toll of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Rights groups and witnesses say the figure could run into the thousands. Public discussion of what happened on June 4th, 1989 is taboo in China.
Coming up, Paris erupted in violent unrest following.
What is my strategy? What is the secret sauce? It is incredibly simple. It is.
是这样子哦。我们自从川普上任以来呢，这100多天以来呢，基本上就是每天都惊涛骇浪哦。那国际的局势变幻莫测。那么过去我们这24小时呢，48小时，大家也是经历了这个上冲下洗的这样的一个过程。预计未来在旧的秩序瓦解，然后新的秩序在组成这个变动的过程呢。这样的一个场景还会不断的发生哈。那未来这个不管是美国法院判决的不确定性，以及关税贸易战发展的这个过程中间的不确定性，其实还在不断的增加。所以呢，这个颠簸的路可能还会进行到一段时间。不过呢，在这个颠簸跟这个 不确定性酝酿的过程中，还是有一些方向非常清楚会发展下去，就是美国政府甚至于不只是川普这一任。要解决的这些国际失衡、结构上的问题，还有中共在不同层次不断挑战美国这样的一个风险未来一定美国政府会去处理的，这样的方向是不会改变的。那也许时程上会有一些改变，也许方式上法律上的一个调整会进行一段时间，但是未来这样的一个大方向战略的一个发展一定会持续下去。